Welcome back, everyone, to a new story. We really hope you enjoy it. It started with a voice, not a sound in the room, not a whisper from the hallway, but a voice inside my own skull, as clear and real as my own thoughts. Wake up, my sweet boy. The words were smooth, like dark honey, and laced with an amusement that sent a cold spike of dread through my chest. My eyes snapped open. The first thing I saw was the familiar cracked ceiling of my bedroom, painted in the pale, gray light of dawn. The second thing I felt was the jarring certainty that I was alone. There was no one here. I sat bolt upright, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The sheets were tangled around my legs. I ran a hand through my messy brown hair, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. "Who's there?" I whispered, my voice a rough croak. A soft musical laugh echoed in my mind. It was a sound so intimate it felt like a violation. "Oh, you know who's here. You invited me after all." My blood ran cold. The night before, it came rushing back in a nauseating wave of cheap beer, incense, and foolish bravado. Maria. It was always about Maria. Maria was the kind of girl who seemed to be painted in shades of charcoal and moonlight. She worked the evening shift at the same coffee shop I did. A beautiful goth creature with eyes lined in thick black coal and a collection of silver rings that clicked softly when she moved. I was, to put it mildly, completely and utterly infatuated with her. I was also Devon, a 22-year-old walking cliché of social awkwardness. I tripped over my own feet, stammered when I tried to talk to her, and generally existed in a state of perpetual, low-grade embarrassment. Last night, after closing, she'd brought out a worn, leather-bound book. "It's just for fun," she'd said, her dark lips curling into a sly smile, a little summoning ritual, to call on a spirit of change. I, desperate for her to see me as anything other than the clumsy barista who kept spilling oat milk, had agreed instantly. We'd lit candles, drawn a clumsy chalk circle on the floor of her apartment, and chanted words that felt alien and ridiculous on my tongue. I'd felt nothing but a fool. Apparently, I was wrong. A spirit of change. The voice purred inside my head. "That's me. You can call me Azra. It's a pleasure to finally be acquainted." "This isn't real," I muttered, swinging my legs out of bed. "I'm dreaming. Or I'm having a psychotic break." "Neither," Azra replied cheerfully. "You performed the ritual, you offered a vessel, and I accepted. We're roommates now. Very, very close roommates." I stumbled into the bathroom, my reflection a pale, terrified stranger in the dim light. I leaned over the sink, splashing cold water on my face, hoping to wash away the phantom voice, but she was still there, a constant, humming presence at the back of my consciousness. I looked up, ready to see my usual tired face, the one with the perpetual 5 o'clock shadow I could never quite shave away, but something was wrong. My jawline, it looked softer. I leaned closer to the mirror, my fingers tracing the skin. It was smooth, too smooth. There was no stubble, not a hint of it. It was as if I'd never been able to grow a beard in the first place. What did you do?" I asked the reflection, my voice trembling. "Just a little tidying up," Azra said, her tone light and breezy. "That scratchy stuff is so unpleasant. This is much better. Don't you think softer, more touchable?" I frantically rubbed my chin, my cheeks, my upper lip. The skin was as smooth as polished stone. Panic began to claw its way up my throat. This was real. This was happening. A female demon was inside my head, and she was already changing things. "Change it back," I demanded, my voice cracking. "Now, why would I do that?" she cooed. "This is what you wanted, isn't it? A change, a way to get her to notice you. Trust me, Devon, this is just the beginning. We're going to have so much fun together." Her laughter filled my head again. A silken, terrifying sound that promised a future I couldn't begin to comprehend. I stared at my reflection, at the subtle, unnerving softness in my features, and for the first time in my life, I was truly afraid of the person I saw in the mirror. Getting ready for work was an exercise in surreal horror. Every familiar action felt alien, as I pulled on my worn jeans and the standard-issue black polo shirt with the Grindhouse Cafe logo. The fabric felt different against my skin. It was a sensation I couldn't quite place, a lack of friction, a smoothness that wasn't there yesterday. Azra remained quiet, a watchful presence, letting me stew in my own confusion. When I arrived at the cafe, Kevin, the morning shift manager, gave me a strange look. He was a big no-nonsense guy whose idea of a deep conversation was complaining about the price of coffee beans. "Whoa, Devin," he said, squinting at me. "You look different." "Just got a good night's sleep," I mumbled, heading behind the counter and trying to avoid his gaze. "No, it's not that," he pressed, leaning over the espresso machine. "You look, I don't know, cleaner. Did you get a facial or something?" "He can see it," Azra whispered in my mind, a hint of pride in her voice. "Even this lumbering oaf can see you're improving." I ignored her, focusing on the rhythmic, mechanical process of grinding beans and steaming milk. It was my anchor in a sea of madness. If I could just do my job, maybe I could pretend everything was normal, but nothing was normal. I could feel the subtle shift in how my body moved. My usual clumsiness was still there, but it was softer. When I bumped into the counter, it felt less like a jarring collision and more like a gentle bounce. Then, the little bell above the door chimed, and Maria walked in. My heart did its usual stutter step. She was a vision in black lace and worn-out combat boots, her dark hair falling in a straight sheet past her shoulders. But today, her expression was different. Usually, she gave me a small, polite nod. Today, her kohl-rimmed eyes locked onto mine with an unnerving intensity. A slow, knowing smile spread across her face, as if she was in on a secret that I was only just beginning to understand. She walked right up to the counter, bypassing the line. "Devin," she said, her voice a low purr, "you're looking well." I opened my mouth to say something, probably something stupid like thanks, but my body moved on its own. It was a terrifying, frictionless sensation. My head tilted slightly, my lips curved into a confident, charming smile that I had never made in my life, and my hand, my own hand, reached out and gently brushed a stray strand of hair from her cheek. "Not as well as you, Maria," I heard my voice say, but it wasn't my voice. It was smoother, with a musical lilt that was entirely foreign. Maria's eyes widened for a fraction of a second, a flicker of genuine surprise, before her smile deepened. "So it worked," she whispered, almost to herself. Of course it worked. Azra's voice echoed in my head, triumphant. I could feel her presence surge forward, a wave of confident energy flowing through me. It was her who had moved my arm, her who had spoken through my lips. I was a puppet. The moment passed as quickly as it came. Control flooded back into my limbs, leaving me shaky and cold. I snatched my hand back as if I'd been burned. Maria just chuckled, a low, throaty sound. "I'll just have my usual," she said, her eyes glittering with mischief. "Black Americano, no room for cream." I fumbled through making her drink, my hands trembling so badly I nearly spilled hot water all over the counter. I couldn't look at her. I couldn't look at anyone. All I could think about was the terrifying loss of control, the feeling of being a passenger in my own body. The rest of the day was a blur of anxiety. Azra stayed mostly quiet, but I could feel her there, a silent observer enjoying my distress. When my shift finally ended, I practically ran home, desperate for the solitude of my apartment. I stripped off my work clothes, feeling an urgent need to wash the day, and her influence, off of me. I stepped into the shower and turned the water on as hot as I could stand it. Letting the steam fill the small bathroom, I scrubbed at my skin, hard, as if I could somehow scour her presence away. As the water streamed down my chest, I noticed it. I froze, my hand hovering over my torso. My chest was usually covered in a light dusting of dark hair. It was gone, all of it. The skin was completely, utterly smooth. I looked down at my arms, my legs, the same. Every trace of body hair had vanished, not shaved or waxed, but simply gone, as if it had never existed. I stumbled back against the cold tile of the shower wall, my breath catching in my throat. There now. Azra's voice was a soft, intimate whisper, as if she were standing right next to me in the steam. "Feel that. The water just glides over you. Isn't it better? Cleaner, more elegant?" She wasn't just in my head anymore. She was in my skin. She was unmaking me, piece by piece, and replacing me with something else. I slid down the wall and sat on the shower floor, the hot water beating down on me. And for the first time since that morning, I let myself cry. They were tears of fear, of confusion, and of a horrifying, undeniable truth. I had no idea who I was becoming. The next few days were a quiet war. I tried to ignore Azra, to wall her off in a corner of my mind. I focused on work, on reading, on anything that could drown out her constant, low-level hum of commentary. She seemed content to let me, for the most part. Though the physical changes continued their silent, inexorable march, my skin grew softer, my nails seemed healthier, and the angles of my face continued to lose their sharpness. One afternoon, I came home from a particularly draining shift, ready to collapse onto my bed. I threw open my closet door to grab a comfortable sweatshirt and stopped dead. Hanging there, nestled between my drab collection of hoodies and plaid shirts, were clothes that were not mine. There was a simple, elegant black dress made of a soft, clinging material. Next to it was a short, pleated plaid skirt that looked like it belonged on a schoolgirl, and on the floor, in a neat little pile, was a set of delicate black lace underwear and a pair of sheer dark stockings. I slammed the closet door shut, my heart pounding. "No," I said out loud. "Absolutely not." "Don't be so dramatic." Azra's voice drifted through my thoughts, laced with amusement. "It's a gift, a little something to help you explore our new potential." "I don't want to explore anything," I yelled at the empty room. "Feeling insane. I want you out of my head, and I want my body back." "You're still so focused on what you're losing." "Devon," she sighed, her tone turning gentle, persuasive. "Think about what you could gain. Think about Maria. She's not interested in the clumsy boy who spills coffee. She was intrigued by the one who smiled at her, the one with a bit of mystery. She's drawn to this, to me, to us." Her words hit their mark. A shameful part of me knew she was right. Maria had looked at me differently. "You don't have to go out," Azra continued, her voice a seductive whisper. "No one has to see. Just try it on. Just for a moment. Feel what it's like. For me." I stood there for a long time, my hand on the closet doorknob, my mind a battlefield. Denial fought against a rising, terrifying tide of curiosity. It was just clothing, fabric. What harm could it do finally? With a sense of grim fatality, I opened the door again. I started with the underwear. The lace felt impossibly delicate in my clumsy fingers. The panties were a small triangle of fabric and thin straps, and pulling them on felt both ridiculous and strangely intimate. The lace was soft, not scratchy, and it settled against my smooth skin in a way that was completely alien. Then came the bra. It was a flimsy, unpadded thing, and I fumbled with the clasp at the back for what felt like an eternity before it finally clicked into place. The straps felt tight and strange on my shoulders, a constant, light pressure that reminded me of what I was wearing. Next were the stockings. They were so sheer, like smoke captured in nylon. I sat on the edge of my bed and carefully, slowly, rolled one up my leg. The sensation was electric. The cool, slick fabric slid over my skin, hugging my calf, my knee, my thigh. It was a feeling of being encased, of every tiny nerve ending being brought to life. I did the other leg, my hands trembling slightly. I stood up and looked down. My legs, now hairless and encased in sheer black, looked different, longer, more defined. A strange warmth spread through my stomach. Finally, the dress. I pulled it off the hanger. The material was heavier than it looked. A soft jersey that draped beautifully. I pulled it on over my head. It slid down my body, the fabric cool and smooth against my skin. It was form-fitting, clinging to my torso, my waist, and flaring out slightly at the hips. The hemline ended just above my knees, leaving my stocking-clad legs exposed. I felt a cool draft of air on my thighs, a sensation I had never, ever experienced. In the box on the floor, there was one last item, a pair of simple, black high-heeled pumps. They looked like instruments of torture. With a deep breath, I sat down and slipped them on. My feet felt pinched, forced into an unnatural arch. I stood up, wobbling precariously. I instinctively put a hand out to steady myself against the wall. The heels forced me to stand differently, pushing my hips forward and my shoulders back, creating a posture that felt both powerful and vulnerable. I took a shaky step towards the full-length mirror on the back of my bedroom door. I held my breath. The person staring back at me was a stranger. It was me. But it wasn't. My frame, usually slouched and awkward, was now held in a new alignment by the shoes. The dress skimmed over a body that was starting to look less and less like my own. The smooth lines of my legs were accentuated by the stockings and heels. The delicate lace of the bra was just visible beneath the scoop neckline of the dress. My face was the biggest shock, without the harsh angles and the shadow of a beard. With my hair falling softly around it, it looked pretty. There was no other word for it. My eyes seemed larger, my lips fuller. I was frozen, trapped by the reflection. A war of emotions raged inside me. There was shame, hot and sharp. This was wrong, deviant, a perversion of everything I was supposed to be. There was fear, a deep primal terror of the unknown, of what I was becoming. But beneath it all, simmering just under the surface, was something else. A tiny thrilling spark of excitement, a flicker of recognition. As if the person in the mirror was someone I was meant to be. I reached out and touched the cool surface of the glass, my fingertips tracing the outline of the stranger's face. My whole body was trembling. And then Azra's voice, a soft, satisfied murmur in the quiet of my mind. "You're trembling, my dear," she whispered. "But is it from fear or is it from excitement?" I didn't have an answer. I spent the next hour in a daze, walking carefully around my small apartment, getting used to the strange new sensations. The click of the heels on the hardwood floor, the gentle sway of the dress against my legs, the constant, subtle pressure of the bra straps. I felt like an actor in a play I hadn't auditioned for. The initial shock began to subside, replaced by a kind of numb fascination. I would catch my reflection in the dark screen of the TV or the glass of a picture frame and feel a jolt every single time. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, and I jumped. I wobbled over and picked it up. A text from Maria. "Bar downtown, 9 p.m. I'll buy the first round." My stomach twisted into a knot of pure panic. Go out in public like this. It was impossible. I started to type a reply, an excuse about being tired or sick. "Don't you dare!" Azra's voice cut through my panic. Sharp and commanding. "This is a test, an opportunity. You can't hide in this apartment forever. She wants to see you. She wants to see this." "I can't," I whispered, sinking onto the edge of the bed. "They'll laugh at me. Everyone will stare." "Let them stare," she said, her tone softening again. "They'll be staring because they see something beautiful and new. You're not a man in a dress, Devin. Not anymore. You're an emerging work of art. Now. We just need a few finishing touches." Before I could protest, I felt a strange tingling sensation on my face. I looked in the mirror and watched, dumbfounded, as my eyelashes seemed to darken and lengthen, as if an invisible hand were applying mascara. A faint rosy blush appeared on my cheeks, and my lips took on a subtle, healthy-looking pink sheen. My messy hair began to style itself, falling into soft waves that framed my face perfectly. It was subtle, almost natural, but the cumulative effect was staggering. The last traces of Devin seemed to melt away, replaced by this soft, feminine stranger. "There," Azra said, her voice filled with satisfaction. "Presentable." My fear was still there, a cold, hard stone in my gut, but looking at my reflection, at the polished, complete image staring back at me, a different feeling began to surface. Determination. Maybe I could do this, just for one night. Walking out of my apartment building was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. Every sound, every shadow, felt like a judgment. I walked with my head down, my arms wrapped around myself, the clicking of my heels on the pavement echoing like gunshots in the quiet night. The bar was dimly lit and loud, filled with the murmur of conversations and the thumping of a bass-heavy song. Maria was waiting at a small table in the corner. She looked up as I approached, and her eyes widened. She took in the whole picture, the dress, the heels, the makeup, my terrified expression, and a genuine, warm smile lit up her face. "Wow," she said, her voice soft, "you look incredible." Relief washed over me so intensely my knees felt weak. I sank into the chair opposite her, my entire body trembling. "I feel ridiculous," I managed to say, my voice coming out as a shaky whisper. "You don't look ridiculous," she insisted, leaning forward. "You look right, like this is how you were always supposed to look." We talked for hours, or rather, she talked, and I mostly listened, nodding and giving one-word answers. But as the night wore on and she bought me a second drink, I started to relax. Azra remained quiet, letting me handle it. But I could feel her presence like a warm, reassuring blanket. At one point, I had to use the restroom. I stood outside the doors, one marked with a male symbol, the other with a female, and had a full-blown existential crisis. The one on the right, obviously, Azra prompted, her voice dry. Don't be an idiot. With a deep breath, I pushed open the door to the women's restroom. A group of girls were reapplying their lipstick in front of the mirror. They glanced at me, gave me a polite, disinterested smile, and went back to their conversation. They didn't scream. They didn't point and laugh. They just saw another girl in a bar bathroom. The wave of relief was so profound I felt lightheaded. On my way back to the table, a guy who looked like he belonged on a college football team stepped in front of me, blocking my path. "Excuse me, miss," he said, his smile a little too wide. "My friends and I were just wondering if you were here alone." My blood turned to ice. My mouth went dry. Miss, he had called me miss. He saw me as a woman, a real woman he wanted to hit on. I was so stunned, I couldn't speak. I just stood there, staring at him like a deer in the headlights. "Hey, back off, dude. She's with me." Maria's voice cut in sharply. She had appeared at my side, and she looped her arm protectively through mine. She shot him a glare that could curdle milk. The guy mumbled an apology and retreated. Maria led me back to our table. I was shaking. "You okay?" she asked, her expression concerned. I nodded, unable to form words. The experience was a dizzying cocktail of terror and something else. A strange, illicit thrill. Someone had looked at me, a total stranger, and seen a girl. The validation was as terrifying as it was exhilarating. "You know," Maria said, stirring her drink with a straw, a thoughtful look on her face. "I said that ritual was for a spirit of change, and I meant it." She looked me straight in the eye. "Honestly, Devin, I think you make a better girl than you ever did a boy." Her words hung in the air between us, not as a joke, but as a simple, honest observation, and in that moment, sitting in a noisy bar, wearing a dress and heels, I started to think that maybe, just maybe, she was right. The walk home with Maria was quiet and strangely peaceful. The city lights blurred around us, and the cool night air felt good on my flushed cheeks. She didn't press me with questions or make any more startling declarations. She just walked beside me, her presence a silent statement of acceptance. When we reached my apartment building, she gave my arm a gentle squeeze. "Get some rest," she said softly, "and Devin, don't be a stranger." I watched her walk away, a dark, graceful silhouette against the streetlights, before I turned and went inside. Back in the safety of my apartment, I leaned against the closed door, my body buzzing with a strange energy. The alcohol, the adrenaline, the validation, it was all swirling inside me. A confusing and potent mix. I felt exhausted and more awake than I had ever been. I walked into my bedroom and stood before the full-length mirror again. The girl from before the bar was still there, but she looked different. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes were bright, and her lips were slightly parted. There was a confidence in her posture that hadn't been there before. She had survived the night. She had passed the test. I looked closer, really studying the face in the mirror. The features were still recognizably mine, but they had been softened, refined, and rearranged into something new. The jaw was less square, the brow less prominent, the eyes somehow wider and more expressive. The person looking back at me wasn't Devin anymore. Devin was the awkward, slouching boy who was afraid to talk to the girl he liked. Devin was the guy who felt like he was wearing a costume that was 2 sizes too big. Devin was a ghost. This person in the mirror, she was someone else, someone real. "He doesn't fit anymore." "Does he?" Azra's voice was a gentle whisper, echoing the thoughts in my own mind. It was no longer the voice of a captor, but of a confidant. The name, the identity. It's like an old coat that you've outgrown. I reached up and touched my reflection's cheek. The glass was cool against my fingertips. "Who am I?" I whispered to the girl in the mirror. "You are the person you were always meant to be," Azra replied. "The one who is hiding underneath all that fear and doubt. But she needs a name that belongs to her. A name." The idea resonated deep within me. To shed the old one, the one that felt so wrong, and take on a new one that felt right. "I've been thinking about it," Azra continued, her voice soft and thoughtful. Something elegant, but strong. Something beautiful. What do you think of Lydia? Lydia. The name settled into my mind. Not with a crash, but like a snowflake landing on a quiet pond. It felt perfect. It was soft. It was feminine. It was a name that belonged to the girl in the mirror. It was a name that could be mine. My throat felt thick with emotion. A single tear traced a path down my cheek. This was it. This was the point of no return. I was standing on a precipice, and I had to choose fall back into the familiar misery of being Devon, or leap into the terrifying, exhilarating unknown of being this new person. I looked the girl in the mirror in the eye. I saw her fear, her uncertainty, but I also saw her hope. My lips moved, and for the first time, the name was spoken aloud, a fragile, trembling whisper in the quiet of the room. Lydia. Saying it felt like coming home. It was a key turning in a lock I never knew existed. A wave of profound, bone-deep relief washed over me, so powerful it made my knees weak. From that moment on, something inside me shifted irrevocably. The struggle wasn't over, but the war had been won. Devon was a memory, a story I used to tell myself. I was Lydia, and I was just beginning. That night, I fell into a sleep so deep it was like sinking into the ocean, and in that deep, dark place, I dreamed. It wasn't a normal dream of jumbled images and nonsensical events. It was vivid, real, and breathtakingly beautiful. I found myself standing in a forest, but it was a forest unlike any I had ever seen. The trees were not made of wood, but of shimmering, translucent crystal. They rose towards a sky filled with swirling nebulae of purple and blue, and the light from these cosmic clouds refracted through the crystal branches, scattering rainbows across the ground. The air was still and silent, and with every breath, I felt a sense of profound peace. I looked down at myself. I was wearing a simple, flowing white dress, and my feet were bare on the mossy ground, which glittered with what looked like diamond dust. I felt light, ethereal, as if I was a part of this magical landscape. It's beautiful, isn't it? The voice was not in my head this time, but in the air around me. It was Azra's voice, but richer, fuller. I turned, and I saw her. She was leaning against one of the crystal trees, a small, knowing smile on her face. She looked almost like me, or rather, she looked like an idealized, more confident version of the girl I saw in the mirror. She had the same face, the same hair, but her eyes glittered with an ancient, otherworldly light, and her presence radiated a power that was both intimidating and comforting. She wore a dress the color of midnight, adorned with tiny star-like points of light. "This is our space," she said, gesturing to the crystalline woods around us, "a place within your mind where we can talk freely." "You're real," I breathed, the words feeling inadequate. She laughed, a sound like wind chimes. "As real as you are, Lydia. In a way, we are two parts of the same whole now." She pushed herself off the tree and glided towards me. She stopped just a few feet away, her expression turning serious. "I owe you an apology," she said, and I was so surprised I could only stare at her. "And an explanation." She began to pace slowly, her dark dress flowing around her. "When you performed that ritual, you were asking for change, but you were also offering a home. My original intention was simple: to take over, to subsume your consciousness and live a mortal life through your body for a time. It's what my kind does." A shiver of the old fear ran through me, but she held up a hand. "But something unexpected happened," she continued, her gaze softening. "When I merged with you, I felt everything you felt, your loneliness, your insecurity, your deep buried dissatisfaction with the person you were forced to be. And then, when we started this journey, I felt your reactions." She stopped and looked directly at me. "When you saw your smooth skin for the first time, beneath the panic, I felt a flicker of pleasure. When you put on that dress, under all the shame, I felt a profound sense of rightness. When that boy in the bar called you Miss, I felt your jolt of terrified joy as if it were my own." She took a step closer, her voice dropping to an intimate whisper. I realized I wasn't creating a vessel. I was helping someone hatch. The desire to be Lydia. It wasn't my desire I was forcing on you. It was yours. It was there all along, buried so deep you couldn't even hear it. I just gave it a voice. Tears began to well in my eyes, hot and unstoppable. Everything she said was true. The empty, hollow feeling I had carried with me my whole life. The feeling of being an actor playing the wrong part, it all made sense now. The hole inside me wasn't a void to be filled. It was the space left by a part of myself I had been forced to deny. My plan changed, Azra said, her voice gentle. Why would I want to evict a soul that was finally finding its true home? It became far more interesting to help you, to guide you. She smiled. And now, our work is almost done. The physical changes will continue. They'll accelerate over the next few days. And soon, they will be permanent. There will be no trace of Devon left. The tears were flowing freely now, but they weren't tears of sorrow or fear. They were tears of overwhelming, cathartic release. The finality of her words didn't scare me. It liberated me. The thought of going back, of ever being Devon again, was the true horror. Thank you, I sobbed. The words choked with emotion. Thank you. Azra came to me and, for the first time, I felt her touch. Her hand was cool on my cheek as she wiped away a tear with her thumb. Don't thank me, she whispered, her eyes shining with a strange, fond light. You were the one who was brave enough to let go. All I did was open the door. I woke up with the phantom sensation of her touch still on my cheek, and the image of the crystal forest burned into my memory. The sun was streaming through my window, and for the first time in my entire life, I felt completely and utterly whole. The days following the dream were a blur of quiet transformation. Azra had been right, the changes accelerated, becoming less subtle and more profound with each passing hour. It was like watching a time-lapse video of a flower blooming. My voice, which had been fluctuating, finally settled into a higher, softer register that felt natural and right. When I answered the phone, no one called me sir anymore. My shoulders seemed to narrow slightly, while my hips gained a gentle, subtle curve. My waist tapered, giving my body an hourglass shape I'd only ever seen on other women. One morning, I woke up with a dull ache in my chest, and when I looked in the mirror, I saw the undeniable, tender swell of small breasts I was beginning to form. The process was both miraculous and deeply calming. There was no pain, no grotesque body horror. It felt, organic, as if my body was simply correcting itself, shifting into the form it was always meant to have. Azra was a constant, supportive presence in my mind, offering encouragement and pointing out new developments with a sense of shared pride. Your hands are looking so much more slender, she'd comment as I washed dishes. And look at the arch in your foot, perfect for heels. With my new body came a new confidence. The fear that had plagued me for so long began to recede, replaced by a quiet, burgeoning pride. I started to experiment more with the clothes Azra provided, which now included a wider array of skirts, blouses, and dresses. I learned to walk in heels with a natural grace, my hips swaying in a rhythm that felt instinctual. I practiced applying my own makeup, guided by Azra's gentle suggestions, and found a genuine joy in the artistry of it, in the way a simple line of eyeliner could make my eyes pop. One sunny afternoon, I decided it was time. I chose a simple, knee-length sundress with a floral pattern, a pair of comfortable wedge sandals, and a light cardigan. I put my hair up in a simple but elegant twist, applied a touch of makeup, and looked at myself in the mirror. I saw Lydia, not a man in a dress, not someone in costume, but simply Lydia. I walked out of my apartment and into the bright sunlight, and for the first time, I felt no shame. I didn't hunch my shoulders or stare at the ground. I walked with my head held high, feeling the warmth of the sun on my bare arms and the gentle breeze making the fabric of my dress dance around my legs. People on the street glanced at me, but their looks were casual, appreciative, or simply indifferent. I was just another woman enjoying a beautiful day. The feeling was intoxicating. I sent a text to Maria Coffee, I'm already out. She replied almost instantly, Grindhouse, 10 minutes. When I walked into the coffee shop, it felt like a lifetime ago that I had worked there as a clumsy, insecure boy. Kevin was behind the counter. He looked right at me, and his eyes held absolutely no recognition. What can I get for you, miss? He asked, his voice polite and professional. Just a black Americano. Please, I said, my new voice clear and steady. The moment was a small, perfect victory. I saw Maria sitting at our usual table in the corner. Her face lit up when she saw me, her smile genuine and warm. She stood up and gave me a brief, gentle hug. "Look at you," she said, her eyes scanning me with open admiration. "You're glowing." "I feel good," I admitted, and it was the truest thing I had ever said. We sat and talked for over an hour. The conversation flowed easily, without any of the old awkwardness. We talked about work, about music, about our dreams. It felt less like a reunion and more like a meeting between two old friends who were finally seeing each other clearly. At one point, as I was telling a story, I gestured with my hand, and Maria reached across the table and caught it in hers. Her fingers laced through mine, her thumb stroking the back of my hand. The touch was simple, intimate, and sent a pleasant warmth spreading through my entire body. It wasn't a romantic gesture, not exactly. It was a gesture of connection, of solidarity. It was the way two girlfriends would sit and talk, completely comfortable in each other's presence. We sat like that for a long time, holding hands across the table, the murmur of the coffee shop fading into the background. See, Azra's voice was a soft, contented whisper in my mind. "You're not my puppet anymore. You never really were. This is all you, Lydia. This is your life." I looked at Maria, at her kind, smiling face, and I felt a tear of pure happiness slide down my cheek. I squeezed her hand, and she squeezed back. She didn't need to say anything. I knew, with absolute certainty, that she understood. The world looked different now, sharper, more vibrant. Or maybe it was just me who had changed. Living as Lydia was no longer an act or an experiment. It was simply my reality. I went shopping for my own clothes, delighting in the textures of silk and cotton, the variety of colors and styles. I bought new makeup, new shoes, and a purse that I quickly learned was an essential and wonderful accessory. I was building a life, piece by piece, that felt authentically mine. Azra's voice was still with me, but it had changed. She was less of a guide and more of a companion, a fond friend who shared my private thoughts and celebrated my small triumphs. She was a permanent, welcome part of my consciousness. There was one last thing I needed to do. I met Maria in the park on a warm evening, just as the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. We sat on a bench overlooking a small duck pond, the sounds of the city a distant hum. "There's something I need to tell you," I said, my hands twisting in my lap. Even with all my newfound confidence, this felt momentous. Maria turned to me, her expression patient and open. "You can tell me anything." I took a deep breath. "Devon, that's not my name anymore. It doesn't feel like me. It hasn't for a while." I looked her straight in the eye, my heart beating a steady, determined rhythm. "My name is Lydia." I watched her face, bracing myself for I don't know what. Confusion, pity, but there was none of that. Her dark eyes softened, and the warm, genuine smile I had come to cherish spread across her lips. "Lydia," she repeated, testing the name on her tongue. It sounded beautiful when she said it. "It suits you. It's nice to officially meet you, Lydia." The simple, unconditional acceptance in her voice was the final piece falling into place. It was the external validation that sealed the internal truth. I felt a wave of gratitude so immense it almost brought me to tears again. "It's nice to meet you too, Maria," I said, and we both started to laugh. We sat there until the sky was dark and filled with stars, talking about the future for the first time. My future felt like a wide, open road full of possibilities instead of a narrow, confining path. The next morning, I woke up to the sun streaming through my window. I stretched, feeling the soft cotton of my nightgown against my skin, my longer hair tickling my shoulders. I got out of bed and walked to the full-length mirror, a ritual that had once been a source of terror and was now a source of quiet joy. The woman who looked back at me was happy. Her eyes were clear, her skin was soft, and a gentle smile played on her lips. She was not a stranger. She was me, complete, whole, real. I leaned closer to the mirror, taking in the image of the person I had become, the person I was always meant to be, and in the quiet of the morning, a familiar, beloved voice whispered in my mind, a gentle greeting to mark the first day of the rest of my life. "Good morning, Lydia."